And we begin in Knoxville, Tennessee, where a jury was selected today in the case against 32-year-old Joel Guy Jr., who, according to prosecutors, killed his parents because they were planning to cut him off financially. Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter is in Knoxville, where opening statements are scheduled to begin on Monday. It is a trial we will be covering live here on Court TV. And Shanley, it is also a trial with some very gruesome facts.
It really is, Ted. It's hard to describe exactly what authorities allege that Joel Guy Jr. did in 2016 over Thanksgiving holiday weekend. Now, in 2016, his parents, Lisa and Guy Sr., were last seen on Thanksgiving with family members, and their son Joel was there visiting for the holiday weekend. He lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at the time. Now, when Lisa Guy didn't show up for work the following Monday after Thanksgiving holiday, her employer got concerned and called the Knox County Sheriff's Office to conduct a welfare check. Well, the deputies could have never imagined what they would walk into. It's something out of a horror movie, Ted. Both Joel Sr. and Lisa were brutally murdered and dismembered. Authorities soon zeroed in on their son, Joel, who was allegedly at the home at the time. They have him on surveillance video, allegedly at Walmart that weekend, purchasing items they claim were used to clean up the crime scene that weekend. A neighbor spotted his vehicle at the home that weekend. Now, as far as this trial has gone, the defense has made some motions along the way in this process, but it's still really unclear what the defense may be in this case. We did speak to a local reporter from the Knoxville newspaper today. Let's take a listen.
My assumption was that Joel Guy Jr. Would be somebody that was insane, that there would be mental illness, that we would find out all these things maybe in his past. So I was personally stunned when hearings started happening, and there was no mention of a mental health defense. He's very intelligent. And honestly, the state's motive in this case is that he was a perpetual college goer, and his parents were footing all the bills, and they were going to put a stop to that. And the state alleges that's what spurred this double homicide.
Joel Guy Jr. has apparently been active in his defense, though, Ted. He's filed several handwritten motions, most recently a motion to represent himself, also wanting to override the prosecution and have a judge consider the death penalty if he is convicted in this trial. All those motions so far, though, unsuccessful.
Okay, so we're moving ahead. Let's bring everybody in. Court TV anchors Julie Grant, Michael Ayala, and Court TV special contributor Ashley Banfield along with us. Julie, I want to bring you into this, former prosecutor. The crime scene is about as horrific as Shanley said, like a horror movie. You have body parts in pieces of Tupperware around the house. You have mom's head apparently boiling in a pot on the stove. How do you handle that with a jury, with crime scene photos, and how does it affect a trial when it is so absolutely gruesome?
That's a great question, Ted. For the prosecution, facts as heinous as they are can be very favorable, especially when you have an unsympathetic defendant. So in terms of securing a conviction for the person that the state believes is absolutely responsible for the crime, when you have those facts, you treat them as sensitively as you can. You stand up there and you never stop being a human being, right? And you can acknowledge the sadness and how horrifying it is, what occurred, and tell them to prepare themselves for what they'll see and that it's awful, but sadly, this is part of their service and part of their civic duty, sadly, is to judge this case. So I think in terms of this case, what I'm just seeing, just the bare facts, what we know so far, we have a very unsympathetic defendant. We have horrific facts of how his parents were killed. And the prosecutors have a motive, a really sick motive. So in my opinion, Ted, the prosecutors have a pretty big advantage going into this one.
Michael Ayala, I mean, the opening writes itself. You can hear it now. You know, the spoiled kid gets cut off, so he goes berserk on mom and dad. What about the defense? How do you handle a defense like this? What are you expecting? And are you surprised that there wasn't a mental deficiency defense, at least an attempt for it, during the pretrial motions?
Ted, I think, it's uncommon for us to say we have no idea. But honestly, in this one, I have no idea. I certainly would have expected, as the defense attorney in that video said, that a defense of insanity would have been the way to go. I mean, this type of crime is usually not committed unless someone is not well. He also has wanted the court to give him the death penalty. That tells me there's also something wrong with this individual. So as a defense attorney, I'm going to ask these questions, I'm going to get them checked out, and hopefully come up with a diagnosis that I can use in court to say, hey, please listen to what I have to say about this guy. He is not right in the head. But other than that, I'm not even sure where he's going to go with this case.
Yeah, Ashley, you look at him, and you don't want to judge a book by its cover, but I mean, if they were casting this part, he might get it. It's going to be a tough road, don't you think, for the defense, given the facts of this case?
Yes, but I want to just jump in on what Michael just said, because this is one area of the law I'm just fascinated by, insanity defenses. I agree. He is crazy. There is no one who will chop his mother's head off and put it in a pot on the stove and dismember his father, who isn't extraordinarily sick. But our law doesn't say that that guarantees you an insanity defense. You have to know right from wrong. And it sounds to me like maybe the dismembering and those vats of acid were an attempt to hide the evidence of what he knew was wrong. And usually that's what hoodwinks you on an insanity defense. So I am assuming that that might be the reason that there isn't an insanity defense. But looking at him, I would think a jury would be swayed. And they would also be swayed by just the facts in the case. Then there's that other issue that Michael just brought up that's so critical. He wants to die. He's asking to represent himself only with regard to the death penalty. He wants the judge to impose the death penalty on him if the jury finds him guilty, even though the prosecutors aren't asking for the death penalty and even though he maintains his innocence. The key here is he said, I don't want to sit around in prison for 51 years, which is that request from the prosecutors. And that rings just like another guy named Timothy McVeigh, who also wasn't crazy. He was just really evil. He also accelerated his death penalty by waiving his appeals and was dead within 4 years of his conviction. So I put them a bit in the same boat. You just don't want to sit around for a quarter or for a half century in prison. I get it. I don't either. But that's what's going to happen, more than likely.
Chandler Painter, where are we? A jury was selected today, and it's full steam ahead, I guess, even with COVID-19 for Monday morning.
It is. Late this afternoon, a jury was selected, 12 with 4 alternates. Of the 12, there are 5 men, 7 women. Now, jury selection was quite different today, Ted. It was a closed courtroom due to strict COVID-19 precautions in there. So the media, we were in a different designated spot in the courthouse with a video feed where we could see and listen to jury selection today. They went through 2 full panels, made their strikes, and reached their goal of selection of a jury. Now, the jury was told to not watch any media, strict admonitions from the judge over the weekend because they will return Monday, be sworn in, and that's when we will have opening statements in this case. But big themes today for jury selection were the concerns of a lot of potential jurors over the COVID-19, what precautions the court would take, people who maybe would be uncomfortable coming to court. Inside the courtroom, they will have the jury box and some of the gallery taken up with jurors so that they can have social distancing. Of course, masks are required as well. In fact, we spoke with the criminal court clerk today about some of these precautions they're taking. Let's listen.
Probably the biggest issue we've had is the public has called when they've gotten their jury summons, and they've said, well, we don't know that we want to come down there because of the COVID. And so we've assured them that we've taken these precautions, and so most of the people have come. Like today, we issued 27 this morning. We had 25 show up. We had 26, I think, this afternoon. And so people are coming. Once they see what we've done, they feel more comfortable. But if someone has said, I don't feel comfortable, I have any of these, perhaps they're older or they have some underlying health conditions, the judge has been very gracious to excuse them and not force them to come in.
Now, it's important to note that this trial is continuing over objections from the defense because of COVID-19. They were alleging that there were some constitutional and due process violations and some of these restrictions with the jury, with the mask, and other means that they were concerned about. Of course, the judge says, look, we have to adapt. Everyone else is adapting. He quickly overruled those objections, and trial starts on Monday.
Julie, this is one of the first trials we've seen, full-on jury trials in the same room with COVID-19. Do you think that, what's your take on that? Do you think this is the right move for Tennessee, for Knoxville? And do you think that this could end up, maybe not going the whole 4 or 5 days, which is expected?
Sure. That's another great question, Ted. As we all know, we're in uncharted waters here. And with this case, it's so tricky. And yes, I was a prosecutor, but I like to think very fair-minded, and I try to see everything from the other side, and did a teeny bit of defense work actually as a law student. But I read the defense motion, and I think some of it is very persuasive, especially the part where they're arguing about the defendant's Sixth Amendment right to confront the witnesses against them. And they talk about all the case law that's followed, that confrontation clause and the right to confront. And it's not just the cross-examination. It's also physically facing the witnesses against them. And here when you have all of these barriers like the plexiglass around the witness stand, you have masks, you have jurors seated very far away from perhaps where the attorneys will be, where the testimony is being taken. I can see how these are issues. I can see how the defense is making a pretty persuasive argument for a constitutional rights violation. Also, with the fact that we're supposed to have, a right to a speedy and public trial, and we understand that we need to close off the courtroom to members of the public who aren't necessarily essential, if you will. But who is essential, right? If a defendant has family members or friends who want to be there to show support, shouldn't they be allowed in? So I get it. I think the defense is raising very valid issues. And this is a tough call, especially for those jurors. You want jurors who are going to be paying attention, and not be distracted or rushing because someone's liberty is at stake here. So it's a tough call, Ted, to have a case during the pandemic, and perhaps other eyes will be on this trial, how it's done, and we'll see if this was the right decision or the wrong decision at the end.
Yeah, Michael, so many little things that make a big difference in a trial. That the family of the victim in the front row, the family of the defendant in the front row, those things jurors notice over the course of the trial. Masks, the jury doesn't pick up on the facial expressions. What's your take?
I agree 100% with Julie. As a defense attorney, one of your little stock in trade, one of the things that you work on is your relationship with the jury. Try to find one juror, two jurors who are connecting with you, you connect with them. And one of the things that I found about this COVID time and wearing the masks is that everything feels so cold. People are not making eye contact in the same way. You're not able to connect with people. And I think you'd have that same problem in a courtroom. It would really hinder you from walking around the courtroom and doing your job the best way you know how. So I was also taken by some of those arguments. And I was also taken by the argument that he wasn't getting the full jury that he might have gotten because of the people that would stay away. There are people who are, again, older, people who are sick or have conditions that they want to stay away from any kind of risk with the COVID. And so the jury pool changes somewhat. So I thought that argument was somewhat persuasive. So again, the judge smacked them down, but he may have some issues on appeal. So we'll have to wait and see.
Ashley, you think this should go forward or hold off?
Well, I was really interested just to hear that. And I've been pondering it as Michael and Julie were talking and thought, gosh, those are really good points, except for all those cases where I've seen closed circuit TV and people who are coming in to courtrooms via that, means. You aren't giving, you're not being given your constitutional right to confront them in those cases. And there never seems to be an issue with that, especially when it comes to little children. And then there are the rape shield laws where oftentimes, witnesses can also be literally shielded. And so they have gotten through some of these issues before with regard to, really confronting, your accusers and witnesses. I agree, though. It is a weird time. We've had to accommodate for a lot of weird things, these hearings via Zoom. That's weird, too. And maybe it will open up a whole new area for appeal. I feel like appellate lawyers right now are taking notes on everything we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is moving forward, and we will be there. Chanley will be there on Monday morning, and we will have live coverage of this trial throughout, starting Monday morning at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, right here on Court TV. It should be a fascinating trial as it progresses.